Now, a couple of days ago, I put out a tweet asking for people to send me their drafts, and I wasn't disappointed. We got so many responses. I can't actually cover them all in this video. In this video, I've taken a selection and I'm going to rate them. Okay then, first up, I've got a draft from a long-time subscriber and former member, Ted Not Kravitz on Twitter. He's gone for Onana and Martinez, Man United double up in defence. Saliba, Guehi, Palmer, Martinelli, Mainu, Eze, Hwang, Haaland and Solanke up front. Interestingly, it's got Isak on the bench. I would probably start Isak over Mainu if it were me. Couple of comments about this team. I actually really like the defence. I think Man United are going to be greatly improved this season. Martinez, Onana hopefully being stalwarts of that defence. I also think one benefit of Onana is not only will he keep a decent amount of clean sheets this season, I also feel like he's going to make a good amount of saves too. And the best goalkeepers in FPL are ones that not only keep a decent amount of clean sheets, but get consistent saves bonus. Usually, the consistent saves bonus is worth more points than keeping, more than average clean sheets. And, I think Onana will tick a lot of those boxes, basically. And just with Man United being improved defensively, I think Martinez obviously will keep some clean sheets. Arsenal, best defence in the league. Makes sense to go for Saliba. I'd actually suggest, of all of the three pickable Arsenal defenders, I'd say that's Gabriel, Saliba and White. Saliba's probably the most nailed, so I like him as an option. Mark Guehi of Palace. I would probably go for Anderson instead of Guehi, just because I think Anderson offers a bit more from an attacking perspective, whereas Guehi, very little in terms of attack. So I'd probably go for Anderson over Guehi, but structure-wise, absolutely fine. Palmer, Martinelli, Mainu, Eze and Hwang in midfield. I'm not sure about Mainu. I just don't think he's pickable in FPL. I think you should go for a player that plays in a more attacking position or is just more likely to score goals. Martinelli, with Trossard in the ranks, I just don't know how many games he's going to play this season. I mean, if I were to pick an Arsenal 11, I'd have Martinelli in it, but I think he won't get 90 minutes necessarily every game, and he might not necessarily start. It all really depends on pre-season form, so just one thing to bear in mind. I really like Eze. I really like Palmer. I can't deny they're good options. Hwang, Wolves have some really tough fixtures to kick off, so yeah, whether you want to trust Hwang against those really difficult teams over maybe another 6.5 million mid like Nkunku maybe. I like Haaland and Solanke up front. I think Solanke is being massively overlooked at the moment, to be honest. Isak, Watkins and Haaland are the most popular three strikers, but I think Solanke is up there. He's significantly cheaper than some of them on penalties, which obviously Watkins is not the penalty taker as far as I'm concerned for Aston Villa. Whereas Solanke is. He scored 20 goals last season, 19 goals, same number of goals, by the way, that Watkins scored, but he's 1.5 million cheaper. Nottingham Forest away to start. It's not too bad. That bench, I don't mind it. I mean, Charlie Taylor probably plays as a 4 million defender. Ruslev of Brentford, I'm not entirely sure he plays with Rico Henry coming back from injury. And obviously, like I said, I'd replace Isak with Mainu. So what I'm doing with all of these teams is putting them through the Fantasy Football Hub AI Team Rater. And Ted Not Kravitz, my mate Shaniel, you get 79% according to Fantasy Football Hub. Like I said, I think things holding you back from an AI rating and maximum points, in my opinion, is probably Martinelli and Hwang and then Mainu. The amount of money you've got there on Mainu, if you dropped him to, say, Harry Winks, and you could spend that extra million on maybe Nkunku and then upgrading Martinelli to maybe Anthony Gordon, something like that. That's probably where I'd invest the money. But as things go, not a bad team. Okay, next up, I've got a good member of mine, Ben. His team, he's got Miguel, the Nottingham Forest keeper, and Everson on the bench. I think Sells is going to be the first choice Nottingham Forest kill keeper. So I think he's a really good option, by the way, Sells. With the opening fixtures that Forest have, and the expected goals conceded stats they put up last season. They actually proved, particularly under Nuno, to be a relatively solid defence. And they've got three, I would say, the best three opening fixtures of any team in the league. I just picked Sells because I think he's first choice. Livramento, Trent and Guardiola in defence. Oh, that's really nice. Livramento looks like Trippier is actually off to Saudi Arabia, which means I think Livramento will step up and be that first choice Newcastle right back. So I like that as an option. Obviously, I think we need to watch some pre-season games just to make 100% sure that Livramento is going to start. I can't deny, obviously, Alexander-Arnold's fantastic, so is Guardiola. Son, Gordon, Eze and Mo Salah in midfield. My 4 favourite midfielders, bar probably Cole Palmer. I really like that. Wood, Havertz and Isak up front. I don't mind that as a front 3. But I see you've got Nkunku on the bench there. For me, I would probably, I'd probably drop Nkunku to someone cheaper, or maybe Gordon to someone cheaper, maybe a 4.5 million, and then look to upgrade Wood and maybe downgrade Kai Havertz to get Haaland in. I like Chris Wood, don't get me wrong, but I think if you could get Haaland in your team, that would be better. And someone like João Pedro, you know, on penalties for Brighton, I think he could score a similar amount of goals as Kai Havertz this season. Just my opinion. I don't particularly rate Kai Havertz all that much because I expect him to start a majority of the games for Arsenal. But with his versatility, I think that actually holds him back a little bit in FPL because obviously he can play that number 9 spot. But if, you know, Arsenal, I think they should sign a number 9 this summer. If they do, yeah, it's going to push Havertz back deeper. And even if they don't, they've got the likes of Gabriel Jesus, Trossard, who have had minutes there pushing Havertz back deeper. And he's not on penalties either. So for me, not too sure about Havertz and maybe a little bit too much on Nkunku on the bench. But other than that, mate, it's a really nice team. Fantasy Football Hub gives you an 89% team rating. I reckon if you put in a goalkeeper, they don't actually predict, you can see there, they don't actually predict Miguel to start. If you put Sales in, Rob Sanchez, someone like that, a 4.5 million goalkeeper that the algorithm predicts is going to play, you'd be up there 90-95% with this team, I reckon. I'm a little bit unsure about having a player as expensive as Nkunku on the bench. That's the only sort of reservation I have with this team. Okay, the next one is from a guy, FPL G-Man on Twitter. If anyone could tell me, by the way, what app he's built this team in, I'd be interested to know because it's quite interesting. He's got Johnston, who I think the first choice Crystal Palace goalkeeper is a bit of a question mark at the moment. It's quite an interesting setup where they've got Johnson and Dean Henderson. Dean Henderson went with England to the Euros, so maybe that's something to bear in mind about picking between the two of them. I mean, obviously that's Gareth Southgate's opinion, not the Crystal Palace manager's opinion. But yeah, I'm 50-50 on who's going to play out of Johnston and Henderson, I must say. Guardiola, Konsa, Mikalenko in defence, I think is great. Obviously, Guardiola, don't need to speak too much about him. You know, Man City, they're still favourites to win the league this year. I do expect them to keep a few more clean sheets than they did last season. Konsa is one of my favourite 4 million defenders for sure. Same with Mikalenko, to be fair, offers a little bit of attacking upside, and it kept, I believe, Everton kept something around 13 clean sheets last season. Mikalenko missed a bit of game time, but you know, he was a big part of that defence that kept a load of clean sheets, and they were really solid last season. This is actually Haaland and Salah draft, which I really like. Salah in as captain, obviously against Ipswich away, makes sense. And Nkunku, Gordon and Eze, Isak, Wood and Haaland up front with Rodgers, Anderson and Harwood, Bellis on the bench. I actually really like this team. There's not a whole lot I would change about it, I don't think. Maybe just Mikalenko, because yes, they kept a lot of clean sheets last season, but I don't think it's sustainable for Everton to do it again this season. I just don't think they're going to keep 13 clean sheets again. And the sale of Onana to Aston Villa, I just think in most Premier League teams, they might not necessarily get all the glitz and glamour, but that holding midfielder, you know, centre defensive midfielder is, in my mind, the most important position to most teams because it impacts how they play going forwards and their defence. And I think Onana was really good, and losing him is going to be a big loss for Everton, and I think that's going to mean they concede a fair few more goals. Rodgers, Anderson and Harwood Bellis on the bench I really like. Maybe you could drop Rodgers to someone cheaper, potentially upgrade Chris Wood or Mikalenko, something like that. But ultimately, this team structure and setup I think is really good. And it's not just me who thinks it's good either. Fantasy Football Hub have this team rated at 94% in their AI team rating tool. Haven't plugged it yet, but if you want to sign up to Fantasy Football Hub so you can put your own team in this tool, you can sign up 50% off. You can use this tool as much as you like. Link in the description. But yeah, this team, 94%. Like I said, very few changes I would make to it. Just looking at the expected points. No, that's the optimal starting 11 according to the expected points. Yeah, I think this is a really nice team. Chris Wood's a good option with those opening fixtures. Obviously, a little bit of a risk, I would say, that he could share minutes with a Awoniyi. But yeah, I mean, I can't argue with a lot of this team. Like I said, potentially dropping Rodgers to Harry Winks and upgrading Mikalenko to someone like Dalot might be something I would consider. But other than that, this is a really good team. Next up then, I've got a team from a long-time viewer named Malte. Hope you're doing very well this summer, bud. I haven't spoken to you on a stream for a while. Sanchez and Fabianski in goal. I really like this double up, I would say. Both Sanchez and Fabianski are probably the two best goalkeepers at their price point. Obviously, they both have a bit of competition. I'd say Sanchez with the Crystal Palace keepers and maybe Sales of Forest, and Fabianski and Bentley are probably the two outstanding 4 million goalkeepers, although obviously none of them are nailed to start, right? Alexander-Arnold, Livramento, Gabriel Fass and Harwood Bellis in defence. I would be a little bit hesitant about Livramento, but it does look like Kieran Trippier is off to Saudi, so suggests, potentially Livramento could become that first choice right back. One little hesitation I have with this defence is just 2 4 million defenders in there. I think that's probably a little bit too little to spend, particularly when you look at your midfield and front line where you've got, what's that? I'm just trying to count 8 players who are all starters. You can have a benching headache every week, and I think you could drop one of those 8 players to someone at the minimum price point in their position, upgrade one of those defenders to a decent 4.5, and then use the other money that you'll have spare, probably 1 million, 2 million or whatever, to then upgrade maybe Livramento, someone like that. That's probably what I do with this team. I mean, the midfield, I can't argue with it really. Eze, Gordon, Mo Salah, Son, really, really good. One thing I would suggest you do, if you're really keen on picking a Nottingham Forest player like Hudson-Odoi, I'd just look at his stats compared to Alanga last season. I kind of put that into my differentials video if you want to check that out. It's a little stats comparison between Hudson-Odoi and Alanga, because I've seen a lot of people going for Hudson-Odoi in their teams, and I don't think he's a bad pick. But looking at the stats, Alanga was better, in my mind, for expected goals and expected assists last season. It just so happened that Hudson-Odoi put away more goals because he absolutely massively outperformed his XG. Just don't think he's going to do that this season. So for me, I think I'd probably pick Alanga instead. Isak Watkins and Muniz up front, I think, is really good. Obviously, Muniz went through that fantastic purple patch for Fulham last season, where he was one of, if not the best striker in the game for that specific period of time. His form did kind of peter off towards the end of the season, and I think he's a very good striker, but I would ask the question, do you think he can repeat that form again? But I guess, you've got Chris Wood at that price point as well, for example, or Winnie, plenty of other options that you could switch to. Looking at this team in Fantasy Football Hub, they've optimised the lineup for you. They've suggested that for game week 1, you should probably bench Hudson-Odoi, which I think I agree with. You have to obviously have 3 defenders in there. Not quite updated Livramento's expected points yet, because obviously the fact of the matter is Trippier hasn't left yet, and I think they've got Dan Burn as the first choice kind of predicted to start left back. No room basically in Fantasy Football Hub's mind for Livramento in the 11, which I kind of agree with the state of things at the moment. If he is in the 11, I imagine this will go up to something like 95%. But overall, mate, they really like the team. 90% team rating. Definitely go Salah captain. Yeah, good team. Just those couple of changes, I think, that I suggested. Final team we're going to look at, and I picked some teams that I thought had some good variation in them. So even if, you replied to my tweet, and I obviously really appreciate everyone's replies, I couldn't possibly review 30 teams on a video, spend 5 minutes talking about them all because it'd go on forever. But what I tried to do is pick teams that look different enough, and then that would hopefully come close to what you have as a team. And any comments I make about players, etc. across the video, I hopefully cover pretty much everyone that's in your draft. So whilst you might not have got the feature, hopefully it's still relevant for your team. So in goal, Connor Football here has gone for Raya and Bentley. I like that double up in goal. And I'd actually consider with David Raya, when you look at the other Arsenal defenders all coming in at, the Arsenal defenders I would pick, coming in at 6 million, looking at Saliba and Gabriel, and Ben White at 6.5, you can get Arsenal coverage through Raya at 0.5 million cheaper than the other Arsenal defenders. So, yeah, just one thing to bear in mind. I don't think Raya will be the top scoring goalkeeper in the league this season, certainly in FPL, because I just don't think he gets the saves volume. But I do think Wolves at home game week 1 is a good chance of a clean sheet to open things up. Murillo, who I think is an absolute baller, by the way, of a centre-back. Like I said, when going through someone else's, it was Ben's team, wasn't it, with the other Nottingham Forest goalkeeper in goal. I think Forest are going to be good defensively to kick the season off. Nuno is historically a good defensive manager. When Wolves first got promoted to the Premier League, they played through at the back, relatively defensive football, and had a lot of success. And I think we could see Forest do the same this year. Murillo is a really, really good player. 3 great opening fixtures. I really like him as a pick. Guardiola, Mikalenko and Konsa, I think I've already spoken about those 3. And then Wout Fass as your 4 million defender. I think it makes sense. I'd consider Barco as from Brighton, just because I think Brighton have more odds of keeping clean sheets, but Wout Fass will start pretty much every game, I would imagine, for the season. Salah, Odegaard, Foden, Gordon and Alanga in midfield. I really like this midfield. Like I said, when going through the previous team, I'd probably prefer Alanga to Hudson-Odoi. So yeah, makes sense to go for him. And then I do like Odegaard as a bit of a differential at 8.5 million. The one thing I would say though, is at that price point, there are only two midfielders. You've got Odegaard and then Bruno Fernandes. And I just prefer Bruno because he's on penalties. And I just think that adds so much to a player, which obviously Odegaard doesn't have. But, you know, I respect your opinion if you want to stick to your guns and go with Odegaard. Isak, Watkins and Muniz up front. I like the front three as well. One thing I would say, again, I just think there's probably a little bit too much invested in your 12th player, if that makes sense. The first player on your bench, because week on week, it's probably going to be, well, Muniz or Elanga, right? And you could probably spend a bit less in that position and upgrade elsewhere. But regardless, this is what FPL, well, Fantasy Football Hub has as your team rating. Incorrectly, it's actually got Odegaard on the bench. I'd swap him in with Elanga. If you did, I imagine this team gets over a 90% rating. It's looking really strong, to be honest. And in terms of changes that I would make, just looking at it, I'd make very little. I'm really keen on Erling Haaland myself, but I've seen quite a lot of these drafts without him, so I'd imagine Connor Football is not that keen on having Haaland in his team. The only suggestion I would really make is to potentially downgrade one of Elanga and Muniz and just upgrade. So downgrade one of them, upgrade the other, if that makes sense, and spend a bit more cash on a player that is probably a little bit better. I like them both. I just have my reservations as just how many goals they're going to score this season. And I think if you spend a little more, you get your money's worth. But yeah, this is a really nice team. And ultimately, if you started off the game with it, I think it would do you just fine. All right, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave me a like rating if your team did get featured. I really appreciate that. And if yours didn't, like I said, I'm sorry. I had over like 30 replies on the tweet. So ultimately, I couldn't cover them all. But what I tried to do is pick them tactically so that, you know, pretty much every team that I saw kind of gets coverage with the ones that I've showed here. So like I said, apologies if yours didn't get shown in this video, but hopefully you still found it useful anyway. If you did, please leave me a like rating on the video. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of the opinions that I've left here. You know, ultimately, FPL is a game of opinion, right? But just be nice about it if you disagree with me. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content from me, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel that should be just here on your screen. And if you want to sign up to Fantasy Football Hub, I've got 50% off in the link in the description below, and you can do AI team ratings to your heart's content yourself. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that one. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.